Thank you for joining us. This is Happiness, the Sceptics Guide with chartered psychologist and author Dr. Gary Wood and professional skeptic and self-help abuser Paul Flower.
In this episode, we consider the impact on happiness of how we tell our life stories, the words we use, what we include and what we leave out, and what story we'd need to tell to make our happiness insight stick. And more than any other, this episode illustrates our mantra.
This podcast aims to bring you happiness, whatever your objections.
So in a previous episode, it was the review, you said that, oh no it wasn't, everybody wants to be the hero in their own life story. And so it got me to thinking about the old hero's journey thing, you know, as a blueprint for storytelling and filmmaking. So Parsifal and the Quest for the Holy Grail, The Matrix, Star Wars, The Lion King, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Indiana Flower and the Happiness Podcast.
Indiana. There you go.
Indiana Flower. So in this one...
It wasn't a very popular name where I grew up.
So in this one...
Whereas Paul, everybody's name was Paul. Sorry, I'm interrupting there.
But there are no Garys after 1996.
Which is a good thing.
It is a very good thing, actually.
Is it Gary Gilmore's fault?
Probably. Well, no, I don't know who it would have been. Anyway, shall I start again?
Yes.
So, you asked about, in the review, how to make it stick and how to connect it. So the answer in that very sprawling, interrupted a lot introduction is the idea that we start to tell a better story. So we don't have to be the hero. We just have to be the protagonist. So the protagonist is the person who plays the first part in the play. It's the leading role. So rather than being somebody who's totally passive in our own stories and let other people set our goals and tell us what to do, we try and find how can we take the active role in storytelling.
Okay. So this story is about us and our journey to our quest for happiness, our epic quest for happiness and the hurdles that we have to overcome to find it. But it's more about the story that you tell yourself, the narrative that you have in your own head. And is that whether you've got an inner monologue or not? Because I found recently that some people apparently don't even have an inner monologue.
I was shocked to find that out too. Essentially, we all tell the story of our lives. And it's, you know, in filmmaking, it's said it's better to show than tell. And that has implications in coaching because action should be measurable. There's a writer and a coach called Lisa Cron who argues that storytelling is more important than opposable thumbs. And I think it was quite a bold statement. But if you think about the first stories that were told, things like cosmologies, that how the universe came about, they're creation myths, they're things to make sense of the universe. So for happiness then, if we're going to make it hang together and make it stick, it's to work out how to tell a better story with happiness being the end point or the aim or the goal and each of us being our own protagonist. Sounds very grand.
Yeah, it really does. I'd gone quiet because I'd muted my microphone because you were bleeding through my headphones, which is a common problem. Anyway, we must go on. These are one of the many problems that we had. I had somebody fiddling with my radiators earlier on, thought I was going to gurgle my way through this particular episode, but here we are.
Blame the blame the radiators, blame the chair, yes.
Blame the headphones, yeah.
Yes. No, I'm talking about the gurgling. Right then. So when we're talking about storytelling, we're talking about sense making and we're talking about a framework. So we think about when we dream, it's in a narrative form. When we daydream, when we remember things, when we worry, it's in a narrative form. When we plan something, when we gossip, when people says, "How are you?" It's a story because you can give them the full version of the story, the edited highlights, or you can just make stuff up, or you can say, "I'm fine." But that is a story and it's an editing process. So the idea is the choices we make to tell our life stories also define whether things will stick in terms of setting goals. So your story is more than just the facts.
Okay.
It's not a reflection of your personality. It's actually part of the personality.
But does it really matter? And I'm being obtuse to a certain degree here, but I'm just wondering how much No, I know. Yeah, sorry. Deliberately obtuse. It should be on my gravestone, probably. I'm just wondering how much what you tell yourself about your past I can see that it impacts upon what you do day to day and your future to an extent. And, you tell her perhaps you have an idea of the kind of person that you are. But, most of us are open to change and we're here because we want to change, I guess.
Yes, I was looking earlier at your Twitter biography, which is very brief, but there's a story there because it says recovering misanthrope. Now, within that's a story and there's a lot of information there. So what is a misanthrope? Miserable.
Person who dislikes other people, yeah.
Yeah. And recovering?
Trying to learn to love people.
Yeah. Even though there's just recovering misanthrope is a story. But if you take the word misanthrope, that shapes the way we see the world. Like if we call ourselves an optimist or call ourselves a pessimist, that shapes how we see things. Mm-hmm. I love a good moan as much as the next person.
You do?
I do. Oh, I was going to say, no. I was going to make some very inappropriate comment, which again is part of my story to make, the way we use humour. Is my character, my protagonist would have hopefully a dry sense of humour and a sense of fun, but also would be a character that looks into things more deeply.
So a movie based on your life, who is playing you?
Who's playing me? It's got to be somebody very, very devastatingly handsome, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Probably Angelina Jolie. No, I don't know. I think I'd like to have seen myself in terms of a character sense a while ago as somebody like Johnny Depp, because Johnny Depp originally made some really interesting film choices that looked at the world in a slightly different way, and he didn't always go for the obvious choice, and he didn't always go for the easy choice. And I think perhaps Johnny Depp now, perhaps not so much. I don't think I want those gold teeth things and tattoos and
to be a pirate.
And ooh-ah.
Moving on.
Right. So tell me about the recovery bit. Recovering misanthrope.
Okay, so I guess in writing that Twitter bio, I was being slightly glib, which is, part of my story, of course.
Yep.
And I think when you're on Twitter or other social media platforms, you're primarily interacting with some of the best and worst of society.
Yeah.
So noting myself as a recovering misanthrope was just part of that journey, I think, to say, look, I'm here. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to, every bad and good thing that Twitter has to throw at me, I'm going to, try and handle it. I don't dislike people, but I do dislike ignorance.
Okay.
And I really dislike ignorant people who won't choose to learn. And I think that's one of the reasons we're here, isn't it? Why is it that people deny things that are so patently true?
Yeah. So you see, in that two words doesn't look like a story, but we've unpacked it and it is. And within it, there are a series of assumptions. So what kind of things have you done to recover from is there such a word as misanthropy? I don't know.
Misanthropy, yeah. I think it probably is.
Yeah.
What have I done to recover from it? I've tried to be a little bit more social. I think there's a whole section I was reading in your wonderful book, The Psychology of Wellbeing, earlier on about, how we all are social animals, and these stories that we tell ourselves and the stories that we tell to other people are because we're meant to be social. Now, I'm perilously bad at talking about myself, which is an odd thing for a podcast host to be saying. But, I would rather talk about anything else in the world than myself. And that kind of spills over into being a little bit shy, a little bit antisocial. And although you wouldn't necessarily guess it, that kind of has an impact on your happiness, I guess.
So if you were to add a line in to say a recovering misanthrope with an eye on happiness, what would you see, even if it's not you, if it could be somebody else, what would that person need to do?
That person would need to get outside themselves a little more and to interact with the world a bit better, I think.
Okay. So what you've talked about is action. So crucially, the way we tell a story about ourselves defines how we're going to act with the world. Or are we going to allow the world to act upon us? So in terms of happiness, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive to sit there and I'm going to plan out my happiness goals, which will be the subject of the part 2 in this Getting Things to Stick. So the idea...
Sorry, the post-Christmas part 2, I should add, because I didn't record it the first time.
Why didn't you record it?
Because I've been muting the microphone because of the background noise.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry.
Don't call me background noise. You don't know me well enough. Right. As you've mentioned the book, The Psychology of Wellbeing, there's a bit in it about schema, plural schemata, although people do call it schemas. And
it sort of sounds like stigmata, which is...
it's not...
If this was an Easter special, we'd be on top of it.
We would indeed. I'm trying to think of other martyrs. No, I can't think of any more, but
No.
Right then. The idea is that we can't process everything. So part of this problem is, when we're trying to think about how to make happiness stick, is we're having to pay deliberate attention to it at first. So you remember the mindfulness, paying deliberate attention on purpose. But our brains work to these kind of scripts, and they're shortcuts. So we've got a script for going to a restaurant, and it varies slightly if it's one of those restaurants where you point at the picture, or one of those ones where you try to decipher the menu in French. There's a slightly different script, but broadly there's a script, and then there are various options. We've got a script, interestingly, for telling bedtime stories. We don't remember the story verbatim. We remember the structure, and then we add the details. That's why they all vary slightly, but they've all got the same once upon a time. And the newer versions have got the happily ever after. I mean, the older versions had, eaten by wolves or thrown in a river. Poor kids. Now off to sleep now, kids. So,
some people would probably say that we were better off with the unhappy endings and we were less woke as a result. But those people are wrong.
Well, yeah.
That's another episode, so let's not go there.
Well, there is indeed. But when it comes to the point where critics tell us that not wanting tons of sewage dumped into the rivers is being woke, I suspect a lot of people woke up that day to think
suddenly became woke.
Do I really want E. coli? Do I really want... What's that other disease you can get?
Weil's disease, isn't it? That you get from swimming in
canals. Typhus, yes. So you think, yes, I'm not woke, but I've got typhus. Oh, yeah, swings and roundabouts. So.
Survival of the fittest. So your schemata is, the story...
it's like a script.
Yeah, the stories that we kind of choose to live by. And again, it comes back to, this is your narrative, isn't it? This is your own narrative.
But it's the idea, when we first start to do stuff, when we first make a cup of tea, it's not automatic. Now we can probably make a cup of tea and whistle and look out the window and, do other things. We can multitask. But at first, we have to pay attention. So the initial stage in making happiness stick is paying attention to what you need to put into the recipe for whatever, or the script. So psychology pretty much depends on who we are, where we are, and the uses we put psychology to. And when we're thinking about happiness, it's how we define happiness depends on who we are, where we are, and what we do. It sounds like a big review episode, really. So in the past, we've looked at what is happiness, good life versus meaningful life, values, getting over stress, mindfulness, doing more reading or doing more talking. So that's a summary. So if you were to start now writing a script that would look like somebody trying to be happier, what might it look like?
Oh, man alive.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks for that one. Dropping that one like a bomb.
Lulling you into a false sense of security. No, we just start with something like, values is probably the easiest bit to start, because
I don't know if it is, and this is the problem that I'm having with, the previous conversations that we had about, trying to make stuff stick, being true to your values. I think, because your values are innate, you try to be true to them anyway, and you do things. Do you not? I don't know. Surely you do, because it's there within you, and you don't deliberately try to do something, or you don't set out to do stuff that is going to contravene those values, because they are who you are.
But once we're stressed, and we go into survival mode, and we're just thinking about things in black and white, and it's just need to get through this, do our values stay with us, or do we put them on hold?
It's down to circumstances now. I think there are different situations in which, obviously stress does have a big impact on everything and how you do things, and makes you do things in a slightly different way. But at the end of it, your values are who you are. So I think you battle to kind of to protect those.
So again, we're going back. If we're being storytellers and filmmakers, it's show rather than tell. So what would people see you doing for them to say, "Oh, That's a recovering misanthrope who's aiming towards happiness.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether people would recognise that.
Imaginary people.
No, imaginary people that I don't interact with at all, but I'm not sure that people would recognise that in me now.
I mean, the question is that what would you need to do so they would recognise it in you?
And therein lies some of the problem. I don't know. And actually, the internal monologue and the story that you tell yourself and the fact that, you are trying to make yourself happier, does it matter? I know you're talking about action and what other people need to see, but does it actually matter what other people see? Because it's about us, isn't it? It's about, we're the ones trying to kind of change our happiness levels.
It's the difference between I'm reading a book to make myself happy, or I'm going to read a book and do the exercises to try it out to make myself.
Okay.
So that's the difference. So
you're back into the doing stuff.
So it's what will you do to make it? And the answer is, what do you do to make it stick? And the answer is, you do stuff. And that it's a long episode just to say that, but that's essentially what we're talking about. It's how we define ourselves.
So the takeaway from today, how we define ourselves is
just get on with it. Stop.
Pull yourself together, man.
Well, no, it's not pull yourself together. It's like, I know the top 5 scientifically proven exercises that will develop your abs.
Okay.
And I know those because I've looked at research on them, I've looked at papers, and I know the top 5. But there's a big difference between reading that article and expecting to come out with washboard abs just after a couple of reads. And I would argue it's the same with happiness. Reading a book on happiness and then actually doing something as an experiment to try out, they are two different things.
I agree with you. However,
I knew there was that.
I think if you're a personality type that struggles with the concept of happiness and being happy over a long period of time and knowing acceptance I can do, and that's where I've got to, and equilibrium, I'm struggling with, but, equilibrium, a skeptic's guide is not going to get many listeners, although not that we do, but, but
don't listen to these podcasts. The Skeptic's Guide would be probably more. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It's that, you have a personality type. How are you changing that personality type? You have to do some actions and do some digging and look further into it. But, is making this stuff stick? Again, you're right. It does take work and input and doing certain things. And I think there are certain things that I need to do more of rather than just trying to drag myself through every day. But some days the story is grim. Yeah. And it's not a fairy tale.
Well, in other words, we just don't bother then.
No, I don't think this is a bad place to end, and I think we're going to have too much stuff if we carry on, because I don't actually know where we're going.
Well, the upshot is, you said I'm a personality type. So in a story, that would be a character type. But all characters change. The hero's quest, the idea they face up to something, they overcome it, they take wise counsel, and then there is a resolution. It's the idea in a story, like you think about Scrooge. The story of Scrooge, we still use the phrase to
Very
say...
topical.
We still use the phrase to say, oh, you're a Scrooge. Yet Scrooge was a reformed character, and we don't remember the reformed character. We hold on to the original Scrooge, which is a fundamental mistake. So it's the same thing. Do you hold on to the misanthrope, or do you refine it? So Scrooge was still Scrooge, he's just a different version. So the idea of character type, of personality type, means a fixed character who never changes. So it's it's managing to retain the integrity of who we are, which is where the values come in, but trying different things.
That is very profound. I can't think of a better way to finish this episode than that, actually, because that is so deep.
It hasn't stopped you trying, though, has it? Always has to have the last word.
Deep and crisp and even. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you will stay with us on the quest to happiness. And, tell a friend, get them to join in, and, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, even come to Instagram if you like, because we're really working hard on Instagram at the minute.
Yes, I've noticed.
And failing.
No. See, that's the thing. It's better to just try it out and maybe not absolutely hit the mark every time than to do nothing at all. So there's your answer. How do you become happier? How do you make it stick? You approach it like Instagram, you suspend your disbelief, and you just do it anyway. Another brilliant ending. Go on, say something else.
I'm leaving it there. I can say no more.
That was and is Happiness, a Sceptic's Guide with Paul Flower and me, Gary Wood. If you liked our podcast, do show and tell others so they can live happily ever after too.
And if you've really enjoyed it, you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/Sceptics Guide.